series 2. And you might remember from the first one, we had an amazing up and coming producer called Moisin who shared his story and journey. And that was a really interesting perspective to have. And this month, hopefully you can see and hear everything okay. This month we've got an amazing guest. We've got Dapz, who is an amazing wizard at mastering. And I'm just going to bring him into the room here.
Hello.
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 How are you, Dapz?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you very much for having me on as well.
No problem, mate. So, hopefully we're live and everything is okay. I mean, I've got no way to know right now, but we'll crack on and presume everything is good. In this series, when we first started talking about this, and I was interested in having you as a guest,
Yeah.
I said to you, "How long have we actually been working together now?"
God, we've been working together for at least 10 plus years. You know, we go way back, way
I
back.
think it's even more than that. I think it's
It could
about
well be.
13 years. So,
Yeah, it could well be, yeah.
the reason we've got people entering the chat room, so obviously people are seeing this. Hello, everyone.
Yeah, yo, yo, yo.
I wanted to have somebody on my on this podcast or vlogcast, whatever you want to call it, who that I genuinely work with and who genuinely works with everybody in the scene. So
Yeah.
before we get into everything, why don't you tell people a little bit about who you are, how long you've been doing this, and what you do?
Yeah, great. So my name's Dean, aka Dapz, and I run a post-production company called Compound Audio on the t-shirt, as you can see. Repping. No, I started off in the music industry from a very young age of like 13, started DJing. Around that time, you needed money to have a studio. So if you was fortunate enough to know somebody with a studio, you could sort of sit in and watch what's happening. But I started making tracks and music on the actual PlayStation on a program called Music 2000. If anybody if anyone remembers that or anything. But yeah, other than that, it was college, get some knowledge behind myself, and then literally I just started making music. Record labels started picking up on how you getting the sound to sound like that, and who's mixing your stuff. And I was saying, well, I'm just doing it all myself, which then kind of gave me this boost to then start doing the mix downs and mastering for other people. And 10, 15 years on, here I am running a company, offering it as a service now.
Can I ask you a question? Because I thought that was interesting. Did you learn it on your own first, or did you say that what was everything learned from college and then you went on your own?
Well, I mean, obviously, I was into music, like heavily into music, into hip hop and jungle and even happy hardcore. But I just started messing with, like I say, the PlayStation Music 2000, because you could easily put drums together and beats together. I didn't have a clue, but I had ideas of putting tracks together, and this program made it very easy. See, I think someone's even saying, look, we created Energy Flash on Music 2000. See, go on, Barry, well done.
Well, it's
So
good to know that some of the people in here remember those plugins and those early tools that got us started as well, because college is a fairly new thing in the
yeah,
terms of learning music, because back in the day when I started, we didn't have that as an opportunity or resource.
exactly,
College
exactly.
these days is YouTube.
Well,
So
you're absolutely right. YouTube and Google. Do you know what I mean? So for me, like when I went to college, it was pretty much hardware. Do you know what I mean? Like it was on like Cubase 2 or something like that. That's what I started off on. And you're talking early 2000s. So it's always a learning curve, even to this day. Like 20 years on, it's still learning new
that
stuff, new techniques.
that makes me laugh so much when you say early 2000. My first record was 1988.
Go on, go on.
I won't tell you what we were using. We were using Lego. Okay, so I was actually using that little Ensoniq keyboard. You could sample for 4 seconds on it, and I would
Yeah,
mix like little hip hop beats and then sample them for 4 seconds and then play like house pads, because this was before obviously jungle and hardcore were even invented. It was
exactly.
acid house. So let's just talk a little bit about what we're going to cover hopefully over the next month. We'll see how it goes today. If a lot of people
Yeah,
are interested and we're doing this, we'll do it again next week. This is
definitely.
a free resource that I'd like to do for up and coming producers, people who are thinking about production or are just genuinely interested in artistry and what it takes to be a DJ, music producer in this scene. I thank you, Dean, for giving us your free time, because this is
Oh, thank
something we're
you.
just doing to give back,
Oh, I
and
appreciate
use
it.
as a, and
Means a
use
lot.
as a resource. We hope that people will find this information valuable to them. The first Open the Door was covering sort of some writing, stuff like that, mixing, getting into it, the whole thing. And we'll do
Yeah.
that again, no doubt. But I think mastering is a big issue, because back in the day, when I made music, mastering was sort of the last step. You created the tune, and then you went into a studio, made it. You had an engineer, or you did it yourself. You cut to tape, whatever it was. It was very, very,
Yeah.
different process. And then mastering, you sent it to a mastering house, and or you went to somewhere like Music House to get your dubs cut, and it was a
Yeah.
very different.
Transition and all that. Like,
Yeah,
yeah.
it was very different. But now, when you make music, especially drum and bass, the mastering is sort of semi-embedded in making the music, and you have to go along and sort of create this sound, and almost like with limiters and everything, so it
Of
sounds
course.
mastered, and it's a very different process. So I think a lot of people really want to understand this. So here's some of the topics that we're going to cover, everybody, in the
Yep.
next month, hopefully. I mean, we'll probably
Yep.
get through 4 of them today. We're going to get what is mastering,
Yep.
history of mastering and how it's changed, because that's important to understand. The loudness war, I mean, we all want to understand that one. And we're going to do a deep dive into gear, plugins, what you're using, monitor setup, setting up the room, common problems that Dapz will face when he's mastering, because you cannot polish a turd, people. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Mastering is definitely not a mix fixing process.
no, it doesn't, but we'll get into that.
We'll get into
We're
that.
also going to do preparing your track as a pre-master, for those of you who aren't aware, because with Open the Door, we don't know what stage you're at. You could be a beginner, you could be super advanced. We'll cover all of it. What to listen out for using reference tracks are really good as well. Mastering examples, what not to do, and what makes a great master. And also, less is more. That's an interesting topic. Mastering approach to every genre, and one size fits all versus individual needs. So there's a lot of things that we're going to cover.
Yeah.
And how we're going to structure this class today, if that's okay with everybody, is save your questions for the last, like, I don't know, we'll start probably the last half hour. So I would
Mm.
say we finish at 9:30. Let's look at some questions around 9 o'clock. You can put your questions
Yeah.
in the chat room, and Dean and I, well, I'm going to call you Dapz, because that's how I know you. We're going to get through the questions the last half hour. So we'll do a little talking. We'll answer some of the 4 topics first. And then Dapz is going to do some show and tell. He'll show you what he's got in his studio, and then what he uses for plugins. And then he's going to get right into it. This is all going to be about you, Dapz. So, firstly, what is mastering?
Well, I mean, mastering, as you've already pointed out, is the last process of the production chain. Um, you could. The whole idea is to bring out the details and refine the track. That you're not really supposed to be changing the track. So think of it as like a QC. It's the end goal. So you've made your tune, you send it to somebody like myself or someone you trust, with the audio engineering. And the whole idea is to have like a little, what am I trying to get from this? Is it for streaming? Is it for like, as a file to play out in the clubs? Once you know where the artist wants to go with it, that's when you can sort of bring out all the details, polish it up, make it really nice.
And I'm just going to stick my hand up, because this is an important point. When I
Mm.
send tracks off to Dapz for mastering, he will ask me, what is it for? Is it for
Yeah,
vinyl? Am I
yeah,
putting out, because a record, vinyl is mastered in a completely different way
yeah,
from something that's going to be on Spotify, that's going to be streamed, that's going to be played out. So there are different ways to think of that. So when you're sending it off, and look, a lot of you master your own records. That's awesome. I don't. I always outsource to Dapz, because it's a whole art form in itself, and I'm pretty deaf at this point. So it's best that I leave that to the professionals. I do everything else, but that is a thing that you will have to master, compared to what it is you're using it for, and how it's going to be listened to.
yeah. I mean, like you say, at the end of the day, originally you had the producers making the tunes, mixing it. Then you would send it to a mix engineer. The mix engineer would mix the producer's tune, and then it would be off to the mastering engineer for that last 10%. Ideally, the mastering engineer shouldn't really do anything to the mix, because it should be perfect in hindsight. All we need to do is bring it up to the competitive level, or bring it up to the desired level of the format it's going on, and then hopefully, like some of the tunes you send me, I can just bring it up, a little tweak here and there, and say, well done, great job.
We are very kind. So, how do you think mastering has changed from back before and now, real quick? I mean, what do you think is the main change?
Well, I mean, like going back as far as the 50s, 60s, mastering.
Hold on a minute.
Yeah, but no, we can go right
50s.
back because going back to the
BC.
50s, 60s, like, you know, things were coming in on quarter-inch tape. Do you know what I mean? And the whole idea of the mastering engineer's job was to transfer that to vinyl, you know, and I think it was like the end of the 78s or something. But moving on to, say, the 80s and 90s, the mastering engineer worked with the producer because, you know, we had better tools, should we say, and you was cutting singles. Like, well, let's just talk in the dance perspective, like, you know, jungle era and the hardcore era. You was putting one tune on one side, so you had more room. It means you could have a bit more bottom end. You know, the engineer knew how to sort of tweak the lathe on how to get a better cut, the louder cut or whatever. But moving on to, say, 2000s to where we are now, it's more on digital files, so we can get away with a lot more. We can get more top end, we can get more bass, we can get it louder. It's crazy how things have progressed and changed.
See, dropping some knowledge on you right there. It's good to know the history. It's interesting, I think, to see what's different and what's changed. Let's talk a little bit about the loudness war, because this is something sometimes you and I have even got into a little bit. Like sometimes, when I say got into it, I mean, look, when you've known someone as long as known Dapz, we can talk to each other a certain way, and I'll just be
Mm.
like, look, mate, this isn't loud enough.
Yeah.
And sometimes you'll have to sort of pull me back and explain to me. So can we talk about the loudness war? Because sometimes I get promos, I'm not going to mention any labels, but sometimes I get promos and it just sounds like shite because they're so distorted and they're so
Mm.
crackly, and that you've just lost all the nuances and the quality. And I remember a long, long time ago speaking to various artists, whether it was Dead Mouse, whether it was BTU, whoever it was, when I was
Yeah.
in America, and them talking about picking choice sounds and letting each sound have its own space and dynamic in the track. And it doesn't actually need to be that loud if you've picked the right sounds and they've all got their right EQ and
Exactly.
frequency to live on. So explain to me what the loudness was. How did it start first off, and where is it just too much? And you know, because I won't play a record that's that distorted, because on a
Yeah.
function one system it's just going to sound even worse. And I
Yeah.
now block those labels. I know that sounds mean, but I
Well,
mean, you know.
the thing is, I mean, this is an arguable one, but we can take it as far back as, say, Metallica. Like, Metallica was the ones that were like, yeah, we need this to be super loud on radio. So as soon as our tracks get online, or, well, on the radio, sorry, it's louder than the other tune, and then it's louder than the next tune. So everyone's tune sounds like rubbish, you know, because they're, you know, everyone's perception of louder is better. But since the Spotify era, they're trying to say, yeah,
Sorry.
exactly. It's put a spanner in the works, because there's a very grey area of this whole misconception of -14 LUFS integrated. That, you know, we can cover that somewhere else. But in regards to the loudness wars, so let's say like 2000, yeah. A lot of the tunes, or even 90s, 2000, a lot of the tunes were aimed towards vinyl. So they weren't thinking of loudness. They were thinking of how good does the tune sound and how can we get this put onto vinyl, you know, in the best way to replicate what the artist wanted. Moving forwards, as I said, going to a digital format, you can get away with loads more. So it's as if like production plugins and stuff just became better and better. And I think you've already said about limiting and stuff like that. People weren't putting just limiters on the end of the master bus. They were putting them on their groups, like the drum bus, on the bass bus, and then by doing that, it gives you
Yeah,
more headroom.
that's what
So
I do.
exactly. So loudness for some people is a very, very important thing. But just speaking in, say, drum and bass perspective, like I get clients that just want it at like -8. I mean, to some that's nowhere near loud enough. Some are like, well, you know, I can't play this, it ain't going to stand up. But it's because of the style of jungle or drum and bass it is. Whereas you go to more jump up or Nero, that's where it becomes very important to make it stand up against someone else's tune. And as we've already said, the mastering process isn't there to make that happen. It's all in the mix down. The mix down is so important to make a tune loud. So I can get the tune, I can bring it up as loud as you want it, but the outcome, it depends on the mix. Can the mix hold, like, can it take that sort of punishment?
I think we're going to show some examples of that when we get into
Oh
all of
yeah,
this now, when we start doing the show and tell. I think I want to talk about one other thing real quick for people when they are outsourcing mastering to somebody like yourself. What is the best way for them to export stems? Talk about the bit rate, talk about the level that you bring down. Because when I send you a track,
mm,
the stems, for example, I'll send you everything. I make sure to pull all my stems down to -6. Everything's at -6. There's no limiters on the master. There's no limiters on the pre-master. I'll leave the limiters that are on the groups. I'll pull everything down so you've got a lot of headroom to play. And then I bounce everything in certain stems groups. So
of
you've
course.
got the kicks and the blah, blah, blah. But just explain to people like what is the, what's the best way for you to receive a mix? Like
Okay.
if they're not sending you individual stems like I do, because I like stem by stem
Of
mixing.
course, yeah. It just gives you a bit, it gives the engineer just a bit more play,
It,
you know, by
it
having
does.
having step a bit.
But if
But
someone's
jungle
sending you
rhythms,
a WAV file, how should they, what's the best way for them to export it? For people here who are new and are just learning how to do
okay.
that.
Well, I mean, in the chat already, jungle rhythms is got the best idea. Like they're saying 32-bit float. Believe it or
Nice
not,
one, Jungle Rhythms, big up.
yeah. Believe it or not, a 32-bit float file eliminates the ceiling. So if you export your tune or the stems as a 32-bit float file, the ceiling is just not there. So the peak, as in the peaks of the waveform, will just go through the roof, as in it'll go out the box, out of digital zero. But when the engineer gets it, like myself, rather than me turning it down on the fader of the mixer, I turn the waveform down in the audio box and all the peaks are still there. So to answer the question, if you have the option to export files as a 32-bit float, that's the best way of doing it, because you can leave limiters on, you can leave clippers on, you can do what you want. I will still have the full waveform. It doesn't get clipped. It's still there. But not everybody knows about that way. So
I'm going to be honest, I didn't know about that way
no,
either. So
it's a very hard one to explain to someone, because I've said this to someone in the past. They said, "Oh, can you just send me it as a 32-bit float file?" And they're like, "Oh, but my computer's 64-bit. I use a 64-bit operating system." And I'm like, "Oh, no. I'm not on about the operating system. I'm on about the bit depth within the project or however you're making the tune." So rather than being complicated, an easier way is this -6 dB trick, which a lot of people are now starting to do on YouTube. And what they're doing is they'll put like a limiter or a gain plugin, like a gain utility, and go +6 on the master out bus. And then when you make your tune, all you have to do is just
minus, take
bypass
that
that,
off.
take it off, you've got the 6 dB headroom. But then again, this whole, oh, shall I send it to you as -6 or -3? It's just an easy way for a mastering engineer or mix engineer to say, send me the stems or track with headroom, rather than going into all this sort of like, oh, make sure you've turned this down, make sure you've done all this.
Yeah, and just so someone here is asking why -6. For me, there is no spiritual or psychedelic reason for that. It's literally I just eyeball it and I go play the loudest part of the track and I listen to the track and see where it's peaking, the loudest part, and I just put a loop cycle on that and I go, I think that's about enough headroom. So it just always seems to be around 6,
Yeah.
-6. That works for me.
Well, yeah, I mean, even if you have like an oscillator plugin, so an oscillator plugin will show you the waveform as you're playing the track. And again, all you have to do is just make sure that the peak, the loudest peak, does not go past 0. You can achieve this by putting a soft clipper on. Again, we're not trying to change the character of the tune. We're not trying to add color. We're not trying to, completely smash the tune. It's just to control the peaks. And again, I can show you this in RX. I can drop in a pre-master and say, if I was to get given a tune like this, quite peaky, this is how I'd go about doing it before I'd master the tune, just to gain myself a little bit more headroom or control.
Yeah. So what I'll do, because I think we'll start some show and tell soon. There's a
Yeah.
couple of questions in here, and we'll probably start at 8 o'clock with all the show and tell stuff,
Yeah, of course.
which I think would be really cool. Let's see, a couple of questions. I still need to practice what I preach. Yeah, sure. Should people stay away from programs like Ozone?
I think Ozone's great.
So do I. Why would you?
I,
Why are you?
yeah,
I'm curious.
why are you scared about Ozone? Oh, yeah, also big up Doms as well. I seen you in there, man. So it's good to see you,
Yeah,
bro.
I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with any of those plugins at all. You just got to know how to use them.
The
There,
thing is, I'm sorry, like you can physically master a tune using stock plugins. I've seen top mix engineers mix a whole tune using Logic's like stock plugins. I've seen people master tunes using Ableton's stock plugins. It's how you use them. It's the mix. It's down to the mix. Really is.
The other thing I would say, and this is something I've learned and had to learn sort of the hard way because I do stem by stem mixing and it's more expensive the more stems you put in, is
Yeah.
to have less, not so many stems in there. And when I first sort of, well, when I first started music, I still do it. And, I've learned now to make my tunes almost, I call it dumbing them down a bit, just making them more simple because I tend to put so many things in there coming
Yeah.
from a sort of orchestral background. And, there'll be 20 BV stems and then there'll be the main vocal and then there'll be and it's like I just
Yeah.
have started to make sure that I've got significant sounds and the right sounds that sit in the right frequency. And I'm going for like 17 to 20 stems per track now, as opposed to 78 or 48 or
Yeah.
something like
Something
that.
huge. Yeah.
Another thing I do as well with Dapz when I'm sending him the stems or whether I'm sending Solar to mix a track down for me, whoever has actually helped me in the process, because you don't have to do everything yourself. There's no shame in saying, I don't do this and I don't do that, but I do
Of
this.
course.
As far as I'm concerned, if I'm writing the tune, creating it, the head, the tail, the whole damn fish, who cares who masters it? I mean, honestly, as long as it's done well, I mean, I care that it's you, Dabs, of course, but you know what I mean? Like, who cares that you're not doing it? It's
The,
okay to get a
the
little
thing is,
help, you know.
exactly, but it's you'd be shocked on the amount of ghost producers with any scene, not just drum and bass, but
Hold on
even
a
in the
minute. You'd
major
actually
scene.
be shocked at how many people say they make tunes and don't. I could name them.
Exactly.
I could. Well, okay,
But we're not
look.
going to do that.
Well, maybe. No, no, I'm not. I'm kidding. But what I was getting to is that sometimes I will, if I'm really like, I'm very precious about the way my vocals are created, and I like the
Yeah.
way I create them. So what I'll do when I send the stems off is I will bounce all the vocals as one stem.
Yeah.
And that way I send it because that's the way I want it to be. But I'll also do a dry pass with no reverbs, no delays, just in case they are too much or whatever. Or I'll
Yeah.
do a parallel compression or parallel effect chain, which means I can bounce the reverb separately or bounce the delays separately. So what I do when I send my stems, and I remember sending Blade Runner some stems when we were doing Roughest Gun Arc. He's like, honestly, I've never received stem this way. They're like so organized, like there'll be a folder with bass stems and then bass stems with effects, bass stems dry, and the same process going all the way through. So it
Yeah.
really helps if you're sending somebody to mix your tracks to get organized and send them off properly and do a dry pass and, a straight pass, only in case, because you might have too much reverb or something like that. This
Exactly.
is mainly for beginners because the experienced ones of you will probably already know all of
Yeah.
this, but it's a good tip to make their life easier and cheaper for you in the long run.
Exactly. Just like you just said, just have a conversation with the mix engineer or have a conversation with the mastering engineer. Tell them what it is you're trying to achieve. And as you just said, if they are stem mastering it, send them a copy of the tune. Let them listen to it first, and then they might say, "Oh, you know what? Dial this back or turn this up." That I like to do that with people. I like to just give them my honest thoughts. I'm not going to tell them to start adding effects and oh this. You need to add more uplifting sounds or you need to use more downlifting sounds. I'm just going to tell them the tonal balance and the way it's going to get transferred or the way it's going to sound on multiple playback systems.
Of course, the most important thing is reference tracks. I can't tell you
Yeah.
enough how important. Every time I make a tune, still to this day, I'll pop in my favorite track that I'm playing, whether it's I don't know, I'm not going to say any names because we've got loads of people, Blade Runner, Serum, Mosley,
Yeah.
Harley, all these great artists, right, who are around, and some of the foundation DJs as well. And I'll pop that into my DAW, and I'll always A B and listen. And also, it's good to look at that on the Voxo span and have a look and see where their bass lays, where everything is laying, and just sort of do sort of comparison, with that as
Yeah.
well.
But not just that as well. But not saying you're trying to copy the tune, but they might do something like every 4 bars, every 8 bars, or at the end of a 16 bar, they might use that last 4 bars to break the tune down and do something quite interesting. What might make you think, "Oh, that's interesting." It's a difference in arrangement. So you might
Well,
want to just
actually, I think that's a good point, but I was talking more about the loudness and A being
oh
your
yeah,
track
and
and
level
seeing
yeah and
how
levels yeah
levels. Like for me, I use that as a level,
a guide
a
like a
guide,
go
just to
to
just
yeah
to be like, is my bass sitting in the
yeah.
same
Where's
place
their
that
kick
there is?
hitting?
Where's their kick
Yeah.
kicking on the Voxengo span? Where is there, where are things kicking for their track? And then A being it with mine as well. So I just put their track in the door, just turn the volume down a little so it matches mine because mine is unmastered, obviously. And I just use the span, Voxengo, just to look at where their certain frequencies are laying, and I think
Yeah.
that is going to help you. And but what Dapz is talking about is also really great, especially if you're a beginner. I mean, I don't feel like I have to do this now, but it's a really good thing. I teach a lot of students. Like, if you want to see how a track is perfectly
Yeah.
arranged or perfectly made, what you can do in Ableton is you can right click and create locators all along the top of the door, and then you can mimic arrangement. Now, don't, before you all get yourselves in a lather, I'm not talking about copying somebody else. I'm talking about
Exactly.
arrangement, which doesn't change. The arrangement always happens in three places on a track, and that's not going to change. The drop's always going to be roughly the same. And the biggest advice I can give you guys, always when you're making a track, and I'm sure Daps would agree with me, this is something that Moisen and I discussed a lot. When you finish making a track, record it out of your DAW, export it, put it in your thumb drive, and if you've got a place to DJ it, test it out with
Yeah.
your favorite track that you're playing. So let's say your favorite track is a Serum track or something like that, that you know just drops, the crowd love it, whatever, or you love it. Okay, now mix your track into that. Do you get that sort of feeling of like, oh, that was crap, it didn't quite drop? Or do you get that feeling like, no man, that mixed, that
This
rolled,
stood up
you're,
well and it sounded
it's
great. Yeah.
exactly, did it stand up? And you've got to
Mm.
be brutal like that. And a lot of times when I'm playing out, like the few gigs that I've had lately in this month, I've been testing out new tracks. And the best way a DJ can see if their track's any good is to play it to an audience, because if it doesn't get the same reaction as the tune before and the tune after, then you know you got some more work to do on it. And sometimes
Mm.
I'll work on a track for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks until I feel it's there. And then sometimes it just happens in a few hours. It's just like that.
I mean, sometimes they just write themselves. You know what I mean?
Listen to it in your car again and again. Yeah, that was the old test, right? Like, put it in
The car
any
test. Yeah.
crappy speakers, and if it sounds good in the car. I mean, one of the things I say to Daps is, you know, I will first play the tunes he masters on my phone and on my computer. I don't play them on a big system because I want to hear how they sound, because that's how it's going to sound on Spotify.
Yeah.
That's so if you've just got sub in your track and there's no midtones in your sub, do you know what I mean? Then you're not going to hear the sub, and it's not going to have that impact. And
Yeah.
that might make someone's decision of, should I buy this or not? Should I like it or give it a play? And that will hurt your Spotify stream. So
Well,
always
this
think
is
about
it.
how it sounds. Yeah.
I mean, the end of the
So
day, as you just said, like someone might just be flicking through tunes on their laptop. You know what I mean? Not that I advise anybody to do that, but as you just said, if the bass line's not cutting through on a small, crappy pair of speakers, then someone might just go, oh, it's just a beat. And,
and
they're not
Jungle
really
Rhythms is
going in.
saying get it right in mono first, which is
Oh
interesting
yeah,
as well.
yeah. Mono is a very important aspect in the mix.
And that's easy enough to do. You can just stick a utility on your master
Yeah,
channel and you can just put it in mono, and then you can hear your tune in mono.
exactly,
Yeah, there you go.
exactly.
We're
Yeah.
not talking about when you're ill and you can't get out of bed.
No.
Okay. All right. Okay. So should we do some show and tell? I mean, you guys, would you like to see? I think I'd like to see what analog you use, or do you want to go with the plugins first? What are you more comfortable with, Daps?
First, I mean, we can go with the analog, and then obviously
Show
I'll
us your
load up the
toys
plug.
then. Come on, show us
Show
some
us
of
the
the toys.
toys. Well, I'll just flip the camera around so I can move it a bit.
Whilst you're doing that, I will give me a wave when you're ready with that, and
Yeah,
I'll
yeah,
take you out of the
that's
room for a second. But let's look at some of these questions. Let's see. First, let's say hi to a couple of people whilst we're waiting for Daps to get his stuff together there. Nathan, Wally, hello. Jungle Rhythms, we said hello. Adamski A. James Dolph. Ontology, I hope I got that right. Ontology. And Mark and Future Classics DB official, and Ant Bailey. Hello, everyone. And to everybody who's watching, thanks so much for joining us right now. I think Daps is ready. Let's have a look at some of these toys that he's got going on. There we go. Walk us through what you got here then.
So, just so you know, I used to have like bays and racks of analog gear, right? But remember, analog is not a necessity; it's a luxury.
Oh,
So,
that hurts.
a lot of people will slap me for saying this, but plugins have come a very, very long way. And if you can't achieve a good sound using plugins, and you feel like you have to go to analog, then you need to start rethinking. But it could swing both ways. Analog can make things sound worse. Do you know what I mean? You can add a ton of noise, a ton of crap, which you don't need. Anyway, rambling. So,
No, that's good advice. And actually, you're right. There are some plugins that actually recreate the analog sound perfectly. And I've worked with Hans Zimmer and massive producers like that. And that it's not all analog with them either.
okay, Okay, I will try and stay nice and clear. Just tell me if I go quiet because obviously I'm moving around the room a little bit.
All right, mate.
Okay, so at the top here is
Bit quiet.
okay. So at the top is the 8 pre, so Motu 8 pre. Basically, that is just an ADAT unit. It just gives me 8 more ins, 8 more outputs on my system. That's all this little beast is.
Okay, so what you're saying is that's an ADAT, yeah, and it gives you inputs,
It
multiple
just gives me
inputs.
more inputs, yeah. So I'm using a Prism Sound Live, which I'll get to in a second, and that only has 4 ins and 4 outs. But if I need a few more, I can just draw for this, and it then helps me out. So
Okay,
second
awesome.
in the list, yeah. So second in the list is a Baxendale EQ. You might have seen these on the UAD plugin. Sorry, you might have seen this on the UAD plugins, or I think Plugin Alliance now offer this as a plugin. I'd say the plugin's a faithful recreation. I actually have it as a plugin as well, just because it's a real great bit of kit. Essentially, it's just a low and a high EQ. That's all it is. So we can just come down, lower the bass if there's too much bass in someone's tune, or we can just brighten it up if there's too much. I mean, sorry, if we need more brightness in someone's tune, and then we have like the cuts, like the high pass and the low pass cuts. But these are so gentle, so musical that it's kind of transparent unless you overdo it.
Okay.
This beast here is a Tegler Audio. It's a valve tube, vari-tube compressor. It has 4 transistors. It has 4 tubes on the inputs and outputs. That is, it's really, really nice. They're not that expensive. I don't want to scare anybody, but they are like about £1,200 brand new. But in the analog world, that's good. You know, you're talking like £2,000, £4,000 more. If you want something like this, like I would advise anybody to buy the Tegler Audio. If they want to add like grit or sort of like that sort of tubiness or the transistor sound, this is great. You just push into it with the you know, on the inputs, and then it opens up the size. Oh, it's lovely. I can't live without this. This sort of thing here, I can't recreate with a plugin. That's just being honest.
Wow. Wow.
So this is a Mazalek multi-band compressor. These are great. You've probably seen them in lots of mastering studios online or wherever. So it's great because, you know, it's a great tool to go. I want to listen to the whole
Dapz, just to interrupt you for a second,
Yep.
I've got someone saying your mic's a little bit low in general.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right. Hopefully
Is that
that's
better?
okay. Is that okay, everyone?
Yeah.
There you go. Carry on, mate.
Okay. Sorry.
It's all right.
So this enables you to listen to it as high or the mids only or the low only. I mean, you'll have plugins nowadays that allow you to do all that anyway. But in general, it's a really nice musical compressor that again it's just really transparent and nice. Now this beast here, it's like a Sontech recreation, but honestly, this is so nice. The sound of this EQ is like top sound. So you can have it in left and right, or you can have it in mids and sides. So the right channel now becomes stereo only, and the left channel is mono only. And you've got all your cuts and your bells and shapes and whatever you want to call it, but really, really nice bit of kit. And this is actually a bit of custom kit. Got the logo, of course, standard. So this here,
Wow. Very cool.
so you know on your inserts, so you can have an EQ, or you can put a compressor, or you can put whatever into the inserts on Ableton or whatever DAW you're using. This is the same thing. So I can insert into one, which is my Baxendale EQ there. Number 2 would be this EQ. 3 would be the tube compressor. Or I can swap them around by using the flips. So I can flip them around in case I want that EQ first and that EQ
Wow.
second. So you can buy these. There's a guy in Germany that does make them, but I wanted an extra feature, which was this here, the MS Engage. So basically, if I wanted, I could send this mono, that sides, so I can control the difference between mono and stereo separately.
Wow, that is really useful.
It is, yeah.
Good job.
So just coming down to the front, this is not so exciting, but it's still worth a look. So this is the Prism Sound Liver. It's a nice audio interface. The converters on this are phenomenal. They're brilliant. This little beast here, Rap, I'm sure you You know what
Yeah,
this
I've
is?
got one of those as well.
Yeah, DAT machine. Because I get a lot of DAT sent to me for restoration work. So people like jungle labels or hardcore labels, they'll send me DATs, and I'd rip them and I'd restore them and remaster them in most cases. And then bottom, these Samsungs here, these are just powered surge protectors. So all my kit is just piped into these. So everything's all going off the same earth, you know, and whatnot. So yeah, that is my bundle of joys.
Well, why don't you go ahead and get your plugins ready to show everyone so we can start doing the
Okay.
work and show people what's happening. I'll turn you off. Let me know when you're ready. It is getting hot in here, and do you like my t-shirt? It says Door Life. Look at that. Open the door, Door Life. I'm going to give a couple more shouts out to everyone. So I'm just looking to see here. Like to perform live ads, interest fund to. Not really sure what that means. Get your microphone right. We are. Thank you very much. Yeah, he's got a lot of equipment, and obviously, that's what he does. I don't have any of that gear with me, and I again feel like you don't need to do that. So, let's see. Big shout out to Nathan Wally as well. And to Moisten, if you're watching, hope you're well. And to everybody who is locked in. So I think he's ready now. Let's bring him back in the room. And I think what would be cool is if you could start. Well, you should take over now and show us what you're doing. What are you going to start with? You're going to start with showing us like tracks
Well,
that were.
yeah, I've got something already sat there already.
All right. Let me know when you want me to put that on the screen.
Yeah, I mean you can display it
And
now
make
if you
sure
want.
to maximize. And also for everyone watching, you can also maximize your screen. There's a little maximize button on the bottom corner if this isn't big enough for you. All right, let's see. Okay, there we go.
Hopefully that's okay for some people. I'm just making sure that I'm on the headphones so I can hear through the headphones. But yeah, so I've just got a mastering project up here, and as you can see, I'm using
Oh,
Reaper.
one thing before you start,
Sorry, yeah.
maybe start with the volume really low and then bring it up so we can find out what level people are comfortable with.
Okay, yeah,
When
that's
you do
cool.
play, don't just put it on. It'll give me a heart attack. I'm elderly. So if you could just start the level low, and if everyone in the chat can just say that sounds great when it's great, that would be
Okay,
great. So we don't scare anyone with
I will
volumes.
-5 the channel now. So you know, you just tell me.
So can you just, because I don't know what I'm looking at here, because obviously I don't use the same plugins as you. Show us around this here.
Okay, so the door, this whole area, if you can see where my mouse is wiggling, or the waveforms. This is
Careful, there are children listening.
okay.
No, I'm kidding.
Hang on. So this is Reaper. So I don't know. I mean, Reaper's it's not a very spoke about program, but it's very very detailed. You can manipulate the program like I don't know. You can do anything you want with it. So, for example, I've customized my own toolbar at the top here. So, if you can see these green buttons, which I'm sort of clicking now, yeah, can you see that?
I say people, I can see it. I mean, if I
Okay, cool.
extend the screen, I can see it.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
So, basically, I've created an after, a before, and the reference, and also there's an auto gain. Just like what you were talking about in terms of using reference tracks. This client here actually sent me a reference track, which is this one here on the blue line, like this one here. So I can just go from the track, which I'm mastering, which is here, and I've got a before. So the before is no processing, there's no plugins, there's nothing going through that one, but it's staying at the same loudness as the mastered file, so that louder can't play a role. So again, talking about louder sounds better. If I was to take off auto gain, every time I flick from the mastered file to the unprocessed file, the master's going to sound way louder, and you're going to go, yeah, that sounds great, that sounds amazing, but it don't. Do you see what I'm saying? Like you have to level match. It's very important to level match. So this enables me to make decisions and go, okay, well, what I'm doing is better, or is it making it worse? So I can go back. Do you see what I'm saying?
Okay, so that's Reaper, and that's the program you work within for mastering, basically. Do you make
Yeah.
music with Reaper? I'm not familiar with this door.
Well, you can. I believe like Teddy Killers use this for using, making music, or probably just production. Like they might just make drums in this and then move it onto another project program. I don't know, but I do
Right.
know it's used widely in the band world, the live music world. As I say, it's super cheap. It's £60 for a full license. All the updates are free up
Wow.
until So at current, it's on version 6.8 or 6.80. I started Reaper early version 5, and I bought a license in version 5, and it says I don't need to pay until version 7. And
Nice.
each update is so the next one will be 6.81, 6.82, and the updates are not just bug fixes, they actually throw in new plugins, new tools, like new ways of manipulating stuff. So
Okay, sounds like you should work for them and sell the product.
definitely. But for example, I can make it look like Pro Tools, like boom, there you go. And now it looks like I'm using Pro Tools.
Do people still use Pro Tools?
I believe so.
I'm saying that with respect. I know the
Yeah,
old timers do, but okay. All right.
so
So what
you
have we
can.
got on the can you make it look like Ableton?
There is an Ableton one, but I don't have it at the moment.
Good.
I've got
That's
like a
no worries.
Logic
I
one
was
as
just
well.
curious. That's really interesting that you can
Yeah,
change. I've never seen that in a DAW before. That's an
yeah.
interesting
So
feature. Okay, so what else do we have going on here on the right-hand side?
okay, so on the right hand side, this is Span, but this is Span Plus. So there's a few little extras that you can do. But for anybody that's not using Span, go and download it now. It's at Voxingo and it's free. Voxingo Span, it's free. It's probably the best audio analyzer ever. With what you can do with it and how it works is amazing. So maybe towards the end of our stream, I'll put a link in to that, and also I'll add a link to somebody sort of showing you the ropes with it, and it's really really great sort of information.
Yeah, I have to get my head around. It took me a while because I'm a keyboard player. I'm not. I don't like doing things visually like that. And
Yeah.
tuning snares in Span is not fun.
Yeah, but I mean, again, I, I get use your ears. Of course, we have to use our ears. But again, if you've been working on, okay, for example, if you've been sat at home listening to the TV or crappy radio for an hour, or even in your car stereo before you go to the studio, your ears have tuned in to
Yeah.
that sound. And then you go to the studio and you play a first track and go, wow, that sounds amazing. But it don't, because you're fooled, because the speakers, what you're in your studio, may be better, or your headphones may be better. You see what I'm saying? So it's good to have visual aid. There's times where you may get ear fatigue, and just like you were saying, play a reference track. Whereabouts is it hitting? Is it here or is it here? Where's mine hitting? And it's good for those that also haven't got full range speakers, because
Is is there a particular setting on Span? Is one of the questions we're getting here. What's the best settings on Span?
the
Is there
best
any?
settings on Span. Take a screenshot now. Is that that is the best setting, and I can't expand that. It doesn't expand. But as I say, I will get the link to this video, and this
There you go.
guy, yeah,
Yeah,
this
there you
guy
go.
will he will break down why these are the best settings. But he's using an old version of Span, but it doesn't differ much from that. So the average
Okay.
time it's 2,000 milliseconds, which is 2 seconds. Is short term LUFS, or should I say integrated LUFS, is around, I think it's like 2 seconds or 3 seconds. So you can speed it up. But anyway, we're differing on what these
Let's
are,
not
but you just
dither.
get it.
Let's
Yeah,
move.
yeah, yeah,
Let's move on. But I love the dithering. But carry on. So
yeah.
you've got Span.
So that's Voxingo Span. This here is a new plugin by Soniball, True Balance. Again, it's great because you can load in your own reference tracks, and there's 2 reference tracks here, which is created this as a curve. Now, I like working to curves. I'm not saying I'm trying to push people's tunes to a curve. I'm just doing it as, again, visual aid. If I hear a track and go, yeah, this sounds big, it's got loads of bottom end, it sounds tight, the kick drum's thumping, but for some reason, if it's out the box here, I'm kind of like, oh, maybe it's too much bass, so I dial it back. You see what I'm saying? And just, again, as a visual backup, I'd say. 16-bit diva, tut tut. Nice. So again, it's a plugin that allows you to load in other tracks, but instead of seeing them on, as a visual, you're seeing the tonal balance of the tune. So for example, if I'm working with pop music, I use these 3. It looks kind of weird, but I know if your track is sitting around in here somewhere, you're not far off a balanced mix. You know,
Wow,
it's super
interesting.
useful. Yeah. So I will tell you what I've got in here. So I've got Beyonce, Alien Superstar. I've got Diplo, I Don't Give a F.
Wow.
Yeah, and like I say, I can drop more and more tunes in, and it changes the shape. But when it comes to drum and bass, I know these two is it's like, I don't know. I shouldn't really be talking about this one, but I will share this one with you. It's basically a guide of like, is the tune that I'm listening to, as in if I'm giving feedback on someone's tune, is it in the ballpark? If it's something sticking out here, I can say, listen, mate, you know, there's a snare or there's a bass line or there's something like at this frequency, because you can really home in on it. You can move around and see what's going on. Do you know what I mean? It speeds up your workflow.
Awesome.
Last but not least is Insight by Isotope. So this again is just more analyzing and stuff like that. So I've got the short-term readings, the integrated and momentarily, and that's just telling me how loud a track is. I can look at it as levels, or I can look at it as like the history. So if I press play now, it starts showing me a bar graph, and then I can look back at the tune and go, well, at that point, at 1 minute, it dipped. Okay, maybe I should up that, you know, manually or something. I don't know. It
Do you see
the
why I send my stuff to Dapz to master? Because I just cannot be. It's a
asked.
big enough. I can't, because it's a big enough job making the music, and I just want to play and enjoy the creative process. And it's already so much work working with plugins and getting the mix right and doing all that stuff, that this is just exhausting to me. Not, and I do not want to have to learn another four doors or
Yeah,
million plugins. I've stripped my studio down to just like the plugins I really
bare
use.
essentials.
Yeah, the
Well,
bare essentials.
well, the thing is, I mean, you know, not sort of like blowing smoke, but with the amount of work we get in, I can't sit on someone's tune for like an hour. Do you know what I mean? I've got to work quick, but not like, oh, I'll get it done. Don't worry. You know, here you go. I do put my 110% in on everybody's tune, but I've got to get through the tunes. You see what I'm saying? So mastering, going back to what is mastering, mastering is knowing what not to do on someone's tune. So I could get a tune, I could start EQing it, I could start compressing it, but is it benefiting? You know, I want to get it to a point where it's on a competitive level, then identify what's the problems. And that's just by listening and listening and listening. Do you know what I mean?
Well, that might be a good place to start. I think most people probably want to know, where do you start,
Well, yeah, there's a question
with
right there, isn't there?
is there? I'm looking
Yeah,
at the
there's a
screen
question
full
right there.
screen.
How,
So
how do you start your workflow when
so
working
why
on
don't
someone
we
else's equipment?
start there by showing people like how it works? You put a track in, and are you going to start with a
Okay.
good track, a bad track? I don't know.
Well,
I'm excited.
I will show you exactly what I do. So,
All right.
for example, someone sent me a tune. Yeah. Hang on, let me just see if you can hear this first. Just tell me if you
Make
can
sure the
hear this.
volume's low to
Yeah, the
start
volume
with.
will be low. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I just don't want
Can
to
you hear
hurt
that?
anyone.
I don't know
No.
if you'll be able to hit now. I don't think, because this ain't going through the routing. But can you see RX10 on the screen?
Yeah.
This here, yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. So we don't need to listen. I'm just going to just show you visually. So the tune comes in. I'm going to look at it on this sort of visual aspect here. I will zoom into the low end. I'm looking now at 5 hertz to 120 hertz, and the guy's done a good job. He's low cut all the low frequencies to a point where there's nothing lurking around 10 hertz, 20 hertz, which is probably going to cause a problem and eat up a bit of headroom. We're looking at this bottom bit here. Can you sort of see where my mouse is?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So if I zoom all the way back out again, that's the tune. Yeah.
So what is
That's
that, the breakdown? What's the more so you've got these
okay.
really gold bits and you've got these dark bits, just so
Okay.
people understand what they're looking at, because
So so anybody's not used to looking at this sort of view on audio. It's, some people call it a heat map, and you know there's all sorts of weird names for it. But it's, for me, it's like the Matrix. I can see the tune. So if I zoom in, I can see like there's the kick, there's this like the snare. You can start seeing all the individual elements of the tune. Which, if you don't use it every day, you will be like, how? What are you talking about?
that's where
But
I'm at right now. I'm
yeah,
like, what the F am I
yeah.
looking
So
at?
all these little white dots and all these lines, they represent a point in time for audio. So for example,
Oh,
here
okay.
there's like a bass boom, it goes boom just there, this little white line. Anyway, so look at it as in like waveform. You can see that. You see how there's like little peaks, and this is going back to preparing a pre-master as well. So we'll dive into that a little bit. I'm going to bring these handles down and go, okay, let's look at the crest factor now. The crest factor is the thickness of the waveform, so that's the center of the waveform. Yeah, you see like the
Yep.
dark blue. So, for example, when you send me like your mix, or say, for example, Moisin sends me a tune, that it's a very good crest factor. Although there's transients and there's like nice punch to the tune, but it's very lined off in terms of the crest factor's loud, the tune's nicely compressed. It's been the job of the track is great. But if I get this sort of tune and there's a few stray peaks, I can show you an even worse tune than this in a minute.
So this isn't a good tune, is that what you're saying?
This is half decent. This is half decent. This
Oh,
is half decent.
so
So
this, just so we understand, so this is
yeah,
half decent.
this is
Okay.
half decent, right? Sorry. And I'm going to bring this handle down. It's showing me minus 5.2. So what I'm going to do now is use a clipper, and I'll put it a little bit softer. Okay. And what I'll do is I'll set this to minus 5.2, and I'll say clip just those little stray peaks. There's very, it's very minor, but I'll run that. And if I go back and forth, can you see like how it's just shaved off them peaks that were there? Yeah. The reason why we're going to do that is because that point in time, that could hit a compressor, it could hit a limiter, it could hit something in the chain that will create a distortion. At that millisecond, the track will distort or break up. You hear some tunes which it's going into the breakdown, it's going somewhere, and it starts crackling or breaking up. And these are the reasons, because of these stray overshoots, as they're called. So it's an overshoot of audio or of a frequency. So I can shave them off nicely with a soft clip, and what it does is it just makes my life easier, basically. So I would then export the tune. I'd make a note and say I soft clip this tune at minus 4 dBs or something, using 16 times oversample, I don't know, blah blah blah. So I know then if I'd mastered the tune and the client gets it and he's like, oh, I really like it, but I need to now change the snare, or I need to adjust something, I can sort of recreate what I've done. I can go back and go, oh, I soft clipped that at minus 5 dB. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, you have to be organized.
You have to be very organized and just utilize these tools to the best that you can. So then, as I say, I'll export it, I'll drop it into Reaper. Reaper's now showing me the tunes in color form. I like working like this because what it's saying to me is anything in red is bass, anything in green is a lot higher up in the scale. So when I'm mixing or if I'm using stems, instantly you can kind of make a judgment of a tune before you've even heard it. So for example, look at this.
It's all in the red.
It's all in the red, so it's very bass heavy tune. But that's a reference tune. That's what the guy sent me. So yeah, I would then drop it into Reaper. I'll play the tune. I would bring it up to a level that's on a competitive level. Talking about loudness again. And at that point, I will see how the track's behaving. Is it breaking up? Is it distorting? And then I will start working backwards to correct any issues. And
now I always send you a reference track, because I think it's not always, but I've started to do that because
you give me an idea.
I think it's quite important. But does that offend you when you're like, I actually know what the track needs? You don't need to send me a reference track. I'm not an idiot. But like at the same time, it's like, here's what I want it to sound like. Like it should have this feel. But I think that helps, doesn't it?
It does, 100%. Like if you, for example, we've recently just done a couple of jungle tunes, and you sent me some jungle tunes as reference, and I'm like, that's brilliant, because you've listened to that tune, you're saying, I like this tune, I like the vibe. So again, I'm going to drop it in. I'm going to see where's the bass hitting, where's their top end in this spectrum, and where's yours sitting. And again, we're not trying to match the tune, we're just using it as vibe or character or the feel. Do you know what I mean?
We've got a quick question here saying, do you save templates for each individual project to take on in case they have to redo something?
So a template as in when I load up Reaper, it's already got my plugin list there? Or
I guess the settings, if you did a track from me, for example, you're like, these are rap settings for this track. Are the settings different every time, is what they're asking, I presume?
Yeah, well, I mean, with Outboard, I that's the most painful part when using Outboard, is the fact that when you master something using Outboard and they're like, oh, I've made an amendment, or can you make an amendment on my track, you will have to go back and reconfigure. And there's a great plugin called Snapshot, which takes a pitch. You physically take the pitch using your phone and upload it to a cloud, and then it stores it in a plugin on here. Yeah, so you can see the settings. Yeah, but there's a way around this. Just use the analog for character if it needs it. Like, again, I don't master everything using the Outboard. Like, some people go, oh, I want it to go through Outboard because it does this, this, and this. But if you've sent me a tune that's already got a lot of saturation, a lot of sort of like drive, by running it through Outboard can make it worse. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, if the track sounds great, then try and keep it clean in the box. You see what I'm saying? I'd only use Outboard to rough something up, to give it a bit of energy, to give it what it's missing. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. And also, guys in the chat, if you want to save your questions for the last half hour, that would be great, because we want to get into the flow of things. So I want Dapz to be able to show you what he's doing to the track, and we want to get into it. We don't have a lot of time. So save your questions to the end, so that we don't stop the flow. If that's okay with you guys, we appreciate that.
Well,
all right. So what's next?
So basically, let's just look at this as a mastering perspective. There's 4 tunes here from a really good artist. He's a new lad. These 4 tunes are actually going on... oh, well, I don't know if I'm allowed to say it, actually, but...
Okay, don't get in trouble.
Going on, yeah, they're going on... He said to me I can use them, so it's cool. But they're going on a very, very big Jump Up label. So if anyone's not into Jump Up, I apologise now, because these are those nice sort of banging tunes.
Don't apologise. This is a free open the door session. They'll like what they're given. I'm just kidding.
I'm joking.
Doing it for free.
Okay,
Enjoy it.
I'll tell you what then. Let's just say, which one should we play? I'll play them.
I love Jump Up. I don't want you to be Jump Upist.
No, I'm not. No. My Dapz peak era was Jump Up. You know, like the good old G-dub days and all them sort of
you
days.
can't complain when you get stuff for free. So let's just enjoy it. Go with what you want. Go with what you want.
We'll play this one. If anyone's okay, I'll just go with this one. So, by the way, this is everything bypassed. Remember, this is.
Oh, let us know how
anyway.
the volume is.
Yeah,
if you need it louder, let us know.
Does anyone like jump down? So I'm going to be listening to the tune. I want to know what's happening. So as you can see on the analyzer here, you know, it's a great visualization of where things are sitting. It's quite slow. You know, I can speed up the time, but it's all about making it slow so you can see what's happening over a period of time.
Dapz, can you explain what that white line is on Voxango and what it is you're looking for? Like, where should the bass be sitting on the span for people? Is there a particular frequency you feel is good? Is it different on every one?
It will differ depending on...
But you're going for an even line generally. It should be more or less even, shouldn't it? Well, that's what I've heard.
Well, basically, this is why span's really good, because span... So, for example, let me just play the tune. I won't say anything quickly, but just I'll show you the difference. 1 second. So, this is your typical level. You see how like it descends downwards?
Yeah.
Now, the difference with span is that the tilt is the slope. It's called slope in this. Let's just get rid of that. I can adjust this to 0, which would then make it identical to the isotope or any other sort of plugin. But the beauty of span is that it shows you in a way where the low end should average the high end. And by having that as a visual, you know, oh, there's enough bottom end or there's too much top end.
That's what I meant by it should be sort of even. You're generally told you're looking for that if the bass should match the top end of it as well.
Yeah. Only when looking at it as a 4.5 slope. If it's a 3 dB slope, it's going to change. See, look, I'll show you. See, look, as I change it, it goes to. So now that's the descending slope, which is a 0 dB. But if we change it to 4.5, the low end should average top end. So already this is saying to me, well, this here, yeah, quite annoying, isn't it?
Yeah.
Exactly. So that
Tune's great though. I love the tune.
Nice. So let's bring it up using a utility. This might sort of make things very loud now. So I'm just going to open it up like this way. I'll just put things on bit by bit. Right. Okay. Let's just move all this out of the way. So at the very end of my chain, I have ozone. It's not doing anything other than creating 0.1 of a dB. This is a ceiling. So, and a lot of people that self-master, a lot of people that send me reference tracks, or there's my self-master, or I want my tune to sound like this, whatever, you have to put 0.1 or 0.2. Spotify say you got to have 1, or if it's over 14 lufs, it's got to be -2. By doing this, right, it allows crappy car speaker stereos or headphones or laptop speakers to convert the audio from digital to analog a nicer way. So if I left this at 0, you're probably going to run into distortion quite easy on poor converters like D to A converters. So everything, like any speaker has a D to A, digital to analog, yeah? So the more headroom you give, the better the converters can do their job. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So I like to use 0.1 because we're in a digital domain. This is going to go on as a WAV file. This is only going to go on a USB stick or whatever on someone's hard drive. I know some mastering engineers, they like 0.2, whatever floats your boat. So put that on as a protection. Also, I've got 16-bit diver. Divering's quite important. There's an amazing video by Dan Worrell on YouTube. Look it up. He speaks about divering for 45 minutes, believe it or not. Yeah. He's amazing. Dan Worrell's like an absolute G in the audio world. But anyway. Yeah. Divering. So I don't know if anyone's out there, like, put it up on the comments. If you've had a track released through Cygnus and Cygnus have come back and said, this is not a 16-bit file. This is where divering comes in because of that reason. Because it wasn't divered correctly, so the uploaders at Cygnus think it's not a 16-bit file. It thinks it's something crazy. So that's why you should diver.
Stop dodging about and get your dithering right.
Get your diver.
Get your dither together.
Get your diver on the go. So this is a standard clip. It basically is just a clipper. Again, it's doing nothing, but this is a nice little tip here for everyone who's a geek like me who likes these sort of things. It's got an oversample on it, which is great. I set it to like 82%. And what it does to the audio is it just rolls off all the aliasing or the fold-back distortion. So, again, fold-back distortion is a whole topic in itself. And you tend to get it in the digital domain only. Analog, you will never get it because analog, well, depending on unit, doesn't have like a Nyquist theory or a bandwidth, if you know what I mean. So bandwidth is like, okay, we're working at 44,100, as in the sample rate. And if I go over to here just to show you, I can bring the range in on span. Look at span over here, yeah? Right, so on span, see that red line? You see that red line to the right hand side, yeah?
I'm not seeing it. Oh yeah, now I
can. You see it, yeah? Yeah, you see that red line, yeah? I know it's a bit tight, so that's basically saying because you're working at 44,100, no matter what distortion or whatever processing you put on there to excite frequencies or to add more frequencies, it's going to stop there. And then what it will do is a computer doesn't think in audio, it thinks there's noughts and ones. It folds back the distortion that should be going further up past 20k. Analog doesn't do that. Analog doesn't do that, right? So using this plugin stops that. It stops all the foldback distortion because it's got a really good oversample on it. You can see that little leg there. Again, I can't open this. I'm really sorry, like as in to maximize it. But it's got a nice little feature on it for that. So I'm just gonna bring it up now to a competitive level, and I'll just play it again. So I don't know if you've noticed, but it's distorting now, yeah?
Mm.
Right. That's because we've brought it up to a competitive level. The bass is too strong. And as a result, it's distorting. So we need to now go in and start adjusting the bottom end and stuff like that. So you can see I'm working backwards now. I've gone right to the first plugin in the chain, okay, which is just this EQ. Straight, just a normal sort of EQ. And I'm doing a cut. The reason why I've done this sort of cut is because it needed it. I mean, some people would argue and say, oh, you should do a shelf. Shelves are great, but this track needed a full-on cut. So this plugin here is Stabilizer by Ozone. It's in Ozone 10. I really like this. It's a bit like Gulfos. If anyone's using Gulfos, this is very similar to that. It just enables, it's like an AI EQ. It just moves the tune around a little bit, you know, the frequencies and stuff, tames areas. This is where the juice starts coming in to tame all the, you know, the bands. So I've got a 3-band split here. So you should have noticed now that there was no distortion. The bass feels tighter and things feel a little bit more controlled. I'm hoping you got that. Yeah.
Yep.
And that's because I've used a 3-band split, and what that is I've put it on like quite a high ratio, 4:1 on the compressor, yeah? And it's on a 600 millisecond release. So what's happening now is when the bass hits, you can see the reduction there.
You know, I've got to do this where I start a track like that. You know, as if you're in the other room, and then you go in and then the track. I'm going to have to figure out how to do that with you, Dapz. I love that.
Yeah.
But what I was going to say is there a way for you to, with one switch, if it's not possible, don't worry, switch all of that off so we can hear before and after what you've done so far?
As I say, I've got my buttons up here. So what I'll do is I'll just turn the rest of the plugins on, because then I've added an exciter because I felt like it needed a bit of excitement in the mids to bring it out. But yeah, definitely. Let me play the tune and I'll flick backwards and forwards. So after, meaning after processing and before processing. Yeah, and it'll be at equal volume as well, so you can't get fooled by louder sounds better.
Okay.
Okay. So
Wow. Let me. No, it's fine. If you're going to play that much of the tune, then promote one of mine. I'm just kidding. What was I going to say? I don't know if everyone noticed. The thing I noticed the most is it tamed it in a good way and made everything just tighter and more punchier. Whereas with the other track, with the before, you could hear things spiking off, like the hats jumping out and peaks that seemed. Do you know what I mean? It just seemed a little bit wild.
It was more controlled. But again, as we were saying earlier, we're not here to change the tune, but to enhance it, control areas.
Exactly.
So to some people on the chat, they might be like, well, I didn't really notice a difference. That's cool, because the mastering process shouldn't be about night and day. Although it can happen, you can get a night and day result. It does happen. You know, sometimes you can go to the before and go, oh my God, like really? Is that what it sounded like? But in this case, as I say, these mixes are pretty good. You know, it might seem like there's a lot going on, but I'm not putting, for example, all the pressure on this one plugin. I'm making this just cut and I'm done with that. I don't want to do any more with it. I want to use this plugin because I want that to do what that needs to do. I'm not sort of drawing for one plugin to do everything. You see what I'm saying?
So let's boil it down. What you've got on there? You started off with an EQ, and that you're using just to cut. And I can't see. The second thing is a.
It's classed as the stabilizer. It's basically
And in one sentence, what does a stabilizer do?
So Stabilizer is an AI plugin, AI EQ, which I've got it set to cut, and all it's going to do is cut sort of resonant frequencies and just frequencies that are just not nice on the ear. You know,
Okay.
I've got it set to like EDM music. So, and I'm using it very sparingly. I can see +3, -3. If I just press play, you'll see that it's not moving too much. That's what it's doing. That's what it's doing. See, that's the delta. So that's basically what's the difference.
Can
And
you
as I
hear
said
that,
to you,
everyone? What is cutting out? I hope you can hear
yeah,
that.
yeah. So next in the chain was the multi-band compressor, just to control that low end because it was a bit too wild. There's notes where it went too loud. There's notes what's not loud enough. So if I don't know if you've noticed as well that I've also got a 3 dB makeup gain. So that means when the compressor's not active, there's an actual increase of 3 dBs in the low end. And that's great for things like in the intro, because that's how you get that perception of warmth. You know, like a pad sounds warm because I've boosted it 3 dBs, potentially. But when the tune kicks in, it's pushing it down as much as, we'll have a quick look. You know, I've seen it hitting like -5 dBs at one point. You know, and also there's a lot of YouTube channels out there where people say, oh, if you have to go any more than 3 dBs or -3 dBs, then go back to the artist. That's true, but at the end of the day, I believe do what's necessary to make it sound right, or do what's necessary to make it sound good. So if I have to compress the low end -5 dBs, then so be it. If it's too crazy, will go back to the engineer and say, you know what, I'm not really getting on with this. I'm sort of scratching my head. And you would know that after 5 minutes of fighting with the tune. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, a couple of points I just want to ask. Sometimes with compression, the goal is to make it sound compressed because it sounds tighter, and we're always trying to make snares snappier, tighter. But with jump up, they're quite big, the snares. Do you know what I mean? So the bass the tighter the bass, even if you're working in stereo or whatever. Like, but to me, I'm always going for that almost compressed sound because I want it to sound super tight. Lolly saying, do you use a hello, Steve? Do you use a correlation meter?
Yeah. So I do use correlation meters, like mainly in mixing. So I don't know if anyone's using the Noisier plugin, but Noisier's got a great set of tools here. So if I press play again, and you can see the waveform here is absolutely smashed. But then, you know, you've got everything on this. You got the, hang on,
That
sorry.
is a great plugin. Good
Yeah,
job. You can see everything
it's
they
great. Yeah, you can see
Yeah.
everything on that. It's great for mixing, but it's a little CPU hungry. But yeah, correlation meter. Yeah, you've got to. It's here in the corner. If you can just see that in the corner here. Well,
There you go.
bring it up. So again, more buttons to play with. I can listen to the tune in sides. Listen to it in mono. Left only. You see what I'm saying? Like, all these buttons are here to help me listen to the track in different ways.
That's fantastic. Do you
So
have a Spotify button?
unfortunately not.
I'm just kidding.
But
You know what? Back in the old days, when we would do mixing and we'd go to a studio and we'd be using like a Neve desk or something, which is like a 250 grand desk. You go into. So I did learning curve in the strong room studios. It was an amazing
right.
experience to go in and work on a desk. But often the engineers would talk to me and say, sometimes we get really difficult clients that are kind of a pain in the butt, and we have a
Yeah.
button called the FA button, and yeah, I know you know what this is, but basically they'll play the track to a client and be like, is this better? Is this better? And they'll go, yes, and they'll go, or when I turn this button on or off, and it's basically the F4
Yeah,
button, like
yeah,
does
yeah, yeah,
nothing.
yeah.
And you'd be amazed the amount of people go, no, that's much better. That's exactly what I want.
No, but this is my point. This is what I was saying. Like, when A being the before and after, right? If you so basically, you know what I was saying, I use an auto gain. There is plugins out there. I would strongly advise anybody who wants to start A being tracks with references, get this. It's cheap. It's like £25, and it's by a company called Master in the Mix. Now, I'm going to say Master in the Mix because I'm a beta tester for them as well. So I get to test all their plugins. It's great. But no, honestly, this is amazing. So you can drop a reference in here. So I can go to, so for example, if we go to the project that we're looking at now, and the guy sent me references, we can chuck this in. This is the reference. I can highlight just sections or another section and bounce to and from. But if I play the track that I'm working on, now this line that appears in the bottom is telling me what the reference, the difference between the track I'm working on and the reference.
Huh.
So if it goes up, it means I need more bass to compete with this one. If it goes down, it means I need to cut more mids to compete with this. But again, we're not trying to copy. We're trying to get in the ballpark. Now, plus minus 10 seems a lot. You can go to plus minus 5. If you're within those areas to the reference, then cool. But this reference
That's a
is...
great plugin. I like that. I'm gonna have
you
to.
can do so much more with it as well. Like, I'm just showing you the bare
Right, I want one
essentials.
of them. I want one.
Again, go on YouTube, type in reference. It's called Reference 2 by Master in the Mix. There's tons of videos of people showing you this, and it's so cheap. And another good thing is, let's say you are kind of happy with your tune. Say like you've made a tune, right? And you're like, yeah, I'm kind of happy with this. You make a bounce it out, drop it into this, then like do a save as, so you've always got the settings. But then as you make more tweaks and tweaks and tweaks, you can keep going back to what was it and then go to where you are now, go back to what was it, go to where you are now, and have you made it better? You see what I'm saying? You can have it mirrored. So this mode here, mirrored, basically what that does is it mirrors it in time. So if I move here, it moves with it, as in the timeline, that is.
Why don't we move to? I'm not sure what people would probably want to listen to next, but that is pretty much. What do you think would be most helpful to people with a track? You said you've got some other tracks up there. Are you just going to show like, because we're approaching 9 already? Can
Yeah, I
you
know,
believe
we're actually
this?
flying. I can't believe it as well. I thought, God damn. You know.
But what other tracks
So
did you have there that you were like?
I've
Do you
got
want
a
to?
tune which it's a good example for... There was a problem in the tune, yeah? And I will show you how I sort of went about it. So essentially, I said to the artist, there's a bass line's too loud, turn it down. He did that, and then it uncovered like a can of worms where the mid-range was way too much. So I had to... So, oh no, sorry. No, this is a different tune. I apologise.
Don't
This
worry.
is no. This will be a free download. He said I can use it because it's going to be a free download. It's a bootleg, but no, this tune was great. It just needed more bottom end, but there's way too much top end. I mean, we can quickly flick over this if you want, or I can show you like a problematic tune.
I think it'd be interesting to see a problematic tune. I don't know what everyone else thinks, but I think it might be interesting to do that. And whilst you're looking for that, I will just give people a couple of, let me just hide your screen so you're not sharing other people's information. So we've got a couple of people saying the before mixdown was good and the first. It's all about the mixdown. The mixdown has to be good.
Exactly.
You cannot polish a turd. So if your mixdown is not good, and again, there's no harm at all in outsourcing your mixdowns. Look, if you're making the tunes, you're making the tunes. Let's see what else we've
Well,
got here.
I'll just create a project with this one tune in particular. I'll just set it up now. But no, you're
Yes,
absolutely
people
right.
want problematic. That's what they're looking for, I think.
Okay,
I think
that's
it would
cool.
be interesting. Obviously, we've got to pick tunes carefully. We don't want to make anyone feel disrespected
No,
by
no.
play. I mean, you could always show them one of my problematic tunes. They're always bloody problematic. Excuse my French.
No, but the
Often what
thing is,
happens.
because we have the rapport, we can go back to the mix. Do you see what I'm saying? And me and you would go back and amend things there.
It's got much better. I mean, now I just send him the tracks and they work. But to be honest with you, there was many years where I would send Dapz a track and then he'd fix them, and he'd literally be fixing them. He'd be going beyond mastering. He was doing stem by stem, and then I'd come back and I'd be like, now I hear all my mistakes magnified. So
Yeah,
then I'd have
yeah.
to go back and change a bass line. Do you remember? Or I would go back and be like, I have to change this or that, the other. So, as I've got better and improved, and it's taken years, as I've got better and improved, and through a lot of times people like Solar helping me and teaching
Yeah.
me, Moisten giving me tips, Dapz giving me tips, or me having my head stuck in multiple YouTube videos. I'm getting to that point where now where I'm able to send a master and it's good. But it takes I don't want to say swear words because when I listened back to the old Open the Door, I just swore so much and I was like, God blimey, I sound like I've come from a fish market, innit? And it just wasn't good. So, and also, you know, young kids do want to watch this stuff, and you'll be pleased to know I want to give Restream a plug because we've now got rid of that awful
Mm.
crackling that was going on, and I love Restream, and I just want to give them
Yeah.
a plug because they are enabling us to do this, which is just fantastic. So, big shout out to Restream for having an amazing system that is bulletproof. I'll say that now, and everything will crash. All
Yeah.
right, let me show you your problematic tone.
Yeah. We'll just
Walk
do
us
some big
through,
here.
real quick. Hello from Ukraine. Hi everyone, all over the place, but love to Ukraine. And you know, thanks for joining us. And I hope you're safe. And I hope this gives you some value.
Yeah.
And we've got Dan Cooper saying, I'm into problematic production while engaging with problems. And by the way, this is just one giant head smash. Making music can be so unenjoyable if you don't learn to outsource certain things or just set a
Yeah.
goal of just I'm just going to enjoy creating today. I'm not actually going to play with sound design. I'm just going to use today to sketch the tune out and start there. It can become so overwhelming and in fact I just had experience. I do want to share this with people because I think it's important. I ordered the Fab Filter package and I was having some real problems with delay compensation and some things that were going on with my DAW. It just wasn't working right. And I had to write to Ableton and Ableton give me the solution of what was going on. And, you know, I got so fed up with it that I returned everything and I just used Ableton plugins. And what I learned, and then I had to get some Fab filters back in again once I solved the problem. But what I learned for that
The full
month where I didn't
circle.
well, I learned for that month where I wasn't using any third-party plugins and I was just using in-house Ableton, was that suddenly it was enjoyable again. Suddenly I really knew what I was doing because I've been using all these Boss plugins and now I was just using normal plugins in a way. And I don't know, I just realized that simpler is better. So
Yeah.
when I went back to the Fab filter, because I do like using certain tools of theirs, I didn't go all the way and get all the other plugins I had before. I was just like, you know what? I just need Serum, the Fab filter bundle, and a couple of other bits that I use, and that's it. And you know, we can do that on another
Yeah.
Open the Door. But it really was nice to get back to basics and not be so overwhelmed and feel like I was walking into a maths class
Well, to
before I
be
make a
honest,
tune.
like, not to cut in, but while you're on the topic of going back to stock plugins or whatever, it's like we're so oversaturated with being told you have to use this plugin. This plugin's amazing, and buy this and do that. Whereas again, Dan Worrell, he does a lot of null tests and AB and a lot of EQs. People are saying, well, what's the Reaper stock EQ compared to Pro Q3? And in his showing you the same shapes, the same curves. Okay, they are different in ways, but a lot of the plugins out there are just like selling. They're like little. I don't know. I
I've
think.
wasted so
Yeah,
much money
yeah.
on
I think we all have.
plugins and also people teaching me who just were showing off with all these plug. It's like, you know what? Like just simple. But let's get to a problematic tune. I'm excited to see
Yeah. Well, I
what you
mean,
do.
there's no plugins. I've just started a brand new project here. Now, we're in the process of me discussing with the artist again. He said he's cool for me to use this. But I'm going to show you as an example in case this was the only copy he had and he still wanted it mastered. So for me, I got back to him and I said, you know what? I think this is a little bit too loud. This doesn't cut through very well and blah, blah, blah. And I'll show you little tricks by using certain plugins on how we can sort of get it in a ballpark. So I'll just press play. And as we were talking about earlier, we'll just bring it up because we need to bring it up with level. So just straight for us. I'm going for Ozone because there's a lot of of the utilities I need to use to get this in the ballpark. So it all seems okay at the moment, doesn't it? It seems great at the moment. Like, okay, yeah, this is nice.
I think so. I love the track.
But then listen to how loud the vocals are.
Yeah.
It's 1990.
Ow.
Skip it.
It's the age of trance.
See the difference there between the vocal and the drop. There was no drop because of how loud the vocals were.
It's the age of trance.
You see what I'm saying?
So now do you go back to him and tell him to lower the vocal?
I
What
say,
do you...
yo, you know, let's lower the vocals massively, and he's like, oh, you know, for example, oh, I can't. This is the only copy I've got, but I still want you to master it. So this is the example of like, how do I get around this? You see what I'm saying? Normally, I would get back to the artist and I would say make some edits. So we can either cut round these areas and apply
Lower the volume.
Use manual compression, so I can just use like a compressor just on this bit of audio here, and when this triggers, it compresses it. So that's one way of doing it. As we get further into the tune, you'll notice that the tune progresses, more synths come in, and before you know it, the drums are absolutely buried. So it's kind of like, well, what's happened here? Do you know what I mean? So, Ozone has this nice little tool called Rebalance. And I can go to drums, and we can turn the drums up. It's not ideal, but it will get me out of this situation. So listen carefully to how the drums come up, but nothing else will get changed.
Wow.
See what I'm saying?
That's
So
incredible.
so let's do it before and after. So after, and then before. So that's helped us towards getting a bigger drum sound, because obviously the drums need to make the tune stand up. It needs to have, you know, punch. But again, the kick's not hitting very well. Look at it on the meter. The meter looks like it's gone to sleep. So, again, vintage tape. This is a great tape emulation. So there's some. I'm not one to go off presets, but sometimes you can go like club bass. So let's just enable club bass.
This is actually making me want to get into master. I love this plugin.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah, you know, we said earlier, some people like, do you like Ozone? Yeah, I like Ozone. It's great because I can use all these tools within one plugin. But I think where it gets a bad name is because you can tell it to listen to the tune and self-master it, which is fine. But
Well, there's a lot of people that charge like a tenner for mastering, and they've just
And
got
they
the
just
same
use that.
setting, and they use the same setting, and that's it.
yeah, but when I press this button, it ain't going to start turning the drums up and start using vintage tapes. It's just going to EQ it. But we already know the drums are too low, the vocals are too loud. So how do we get round all this? This won't do that for you because it's not a problematic tool, as in it's not a tool that's going to figure out the problems. It just tonally shapes it. And as I say, sometimes it can be useful. I don't know. It is what it is. But I just like the modules within the plugin. So with vintage tape, without it, so I'll take it off. Then listen to the kick. Listen to how much whack comes into the kick when I turn it on. Did you kind of notice the difference there? So I go before. It's like I don't know if you noticed, but the kick really does just jump forwards in the mix. So hopefully,
Yeah, it does. You can hear it. You can hear it pound
I'll
properly.
try and exaggerate a little bit. I mean, we've just been hitting some super high levels there. For this style of music, you don't need to go that loud, but
I think what
so
we'll do next week, maybe we'll show them a track of mine and see what you
yeah,
did to it. We could do something like that.
definitely,
We are
definitely.
approaching 9 o'clock,
Mm,
which it's gone so quickly. I
it
wonder if we
has.
should do. I mean, we might finish a little early if we don't get enough questions, or maybe we'll
Yeah,
find
sure.
something else to discuss. But do you guys want to pop your questions in now, and maybe we do some questions just so we make sure we get everyone's questions
Well,
answered?
there's a great question there from Nathan saying, "Can I ask a question for Rap and Dapz? Who inspired you musically?"
You first.
Me first. Okay. I'm not gonna lie. I will be straight up with you, right? I heard MB Sweet Love, right? Hang on a minute. Let's just put this back over here. Sorry. Um, I listened to MB Sweet Love, and when I heard that tune, I was like jungle all the way. Obviously, I've heard jungle before, but it was that tune that inspired me to go, what is this style of music? And then rap, I got into spiritual aura, and I got into some cool and flex tunes. But yeah, for me, the inspiration of jungle music came from rap, spiritual aura, the MB Sweet Love. All these tunes were like, oh my god, you know what I mean? It still blows my mind to this day how these tunes were created on the facilities and the tools you had back then. Do you know what I mean?
I think that's a really good point. And one of the things that I always say to myself and to students is that when you're making a track, I try to think, will this still sound good in 5 years, in 10 years? Because the tracks that I'm listening to that I was inspired by, they were made like in 1986, 1987, 90, and you've got tracks like French Kiss and Night
Oh yeah,
Riders and
yeah, yeah.
Bang the Party, Kid Bachelor, and tunes like that that I can still put on now and play, and they sound incredible. And they didn't have the plugins we had. They didn't
No.
have the
Well, there
resources we
weren't
had.
plugins, were there? There weren't plugins.
That's what I'm saying. It's amazing. They were musicians. And so I was inspired more by that era and those kind of producers. But I think I really fell in love with jungle when I went to AWOL. And then I started to hear all the dubs. And it was more the DJs collectively. You'd get Randall on there and then Kenny and, Groove or everyone
Yeah,
playing and just playing these tracks. You're just like, where are these tunes coming from? And a lot of the times the
yeah.
producers never really got the credits.
No,
It was just the DJs that were getting sort of the
yeah.
status, but there were so many, I've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of records behind me, and there's another shelf that goes all the way back as well, and it's like a lot of these dubs, it's just faceless, like there's no names to the producers, and a lot of them don't, they're not making music anymore, and they're really the unsung heroes because there's so many hundreds of thousands of tracks, not just the 12 or 15 classics that everybody knows in each genre. There's so much more, and that's why my show on Cool, I do with Majuli, we want to drop as much vinyl and as much modern stuff collectively, and maybe give a little bit back history and shine a light on the producers that are new as well as those guys from back in the day. And for me, that's who inspired me back in the day was
Yeah.
all of these producers that nobody even knows their name. I mean, you listen to, we all know like some of the stars, but for me, people like Lenny Dice and people like that, and Rocky from DJ International, and all these labels, and a lot of the stuff that came from the Chicago house
Yeah,
scene. It really was the foundation of what we're doing today. I mean, people think there was
of
just jungle,
course.
but before that there was the hardcore, and before that there was
Hardcore.
acid
Yeah.
house, and before that there was what there was. And I remember going to an energy rave and listening to Todd Terry and Dave Angel play, and all these, it was like techno. It's completely
Yeah.
different.
This is it. I mean, just
Rob
from doing
Playford, there
restoration.
you go. Rob
Yeah.
Playford.
Because as I say, I've been doing a lot of restoration work in the last 5 years, and I'm quite shocked with some of the tracks that have been reissued, re-released. Some tracks which were amazing. I mean, we've even reissued some of your tunes. You know what I mean? Like over the
Yeah,
years.
I wonder what people are going to listen to in 10 years' time and
Yeah,
go,
yeah.
will they either go, what were they thinking? Because this sounds like an ankle grinder drill or cricket, like. But there's a great question here for you. What is your opinion on preserving dynamic range within a tune?
I'm all for it. Honestly, if we could, right, I would love to go back to the 90s and keep it nice and dynamic. But again, loudness is such a big thing for people, and again, it's arguable because that loudness does create a character. It does create a sound. So if you was to, so for example, those tunes I was playing earlier, those jump up tunes, they wouldn't sound like that if they was like minus 10 lufs. It needs to be pushed to have that sound and energy. But to answer the question, I'm all for it, mate. Like, let's go back to dynamics.
I know, but we'd all have to do it at the same time. No one's going to do that. Someone won't play the game. And the problem is
Yeah.
that, you know, if a tune, like I'll be going through my promos on In-Flight, for example, when I look at their promos for there and getting music from everywhere for my shows, right? And it's like, if a tune's too quiet,
It ain't
even
gonna
if
get
it's
played.
brilliant, it's just not going to get played, is it? And I almost want to reach out to that person and go, I love this track, but could you just, you know, send
Or
it to
just do it
that?
yourself. Just turn it up yourself. But no, you know, you just said like if it's too quiet. This is going back to what I was showing you in RX, where the peaks are just too high. So the crest factor, the thickness of it, that's where the energy is. And if there's nothing there, there's no energy. Do you know what I mean? So you're going to crank it on the mixer, and it's just not going to cut.
There's a good plugin that I use, but I can't pronounce it. Oscilloscope, it sounds like a dinosaur.
Yeah,
Oscilloscope,
Soloscope or something like that.
something like that. And I put it on the master channel. It does show me all the peaks, and it's also color like a heat wave as well. It's the same thing.
Just like what I was showing you in Reaper.
Exactly. It's a really good tool to have, and I believe it's free as well. I think so. I don't
You
know.
can get that, or you could just buy the basic RX plugin, which is again about 25 quid.
Dapz,
You know?
do you think Ozone 10 is worth getting if you have Ozone 9? Good question.
Well, I did. I made the jump because I've been using Ozone since 5, like version 5.
Yeah,
So
not since he was 5 years old.
no. So as in version 5. Sorry. So if you've got an account with Isotope, they will give you a loyalty offer, and I just always go for the loyalty offer. So yeah, I would say if you've got 9, go to 10, because you've got things like Stabilizer, which I showed earlier. You've got another plugin called I think it's called Characterize or Impact. That's it, Impact. Impact is like a compressor and transient shaper all in one. So you can go plus values, it'll make things sharper, or you can go down and it kind of compresses things. I think it's a great plugin. I need to get in contact with them and say, listen, mate, I'm selling your products. Do you
Yeah,
know?
we should have this be endorsed because we're promoting headphones, we're
Yeah, we
promoting
got the
everything.
vocals, everything.
But
Come on.
talking of promoting, just for a second, if anyone is interested in any of the previous Open the Doors, yes, it's a little crackly, but they are on all my social media channels, especially my YouTube channel. And typically what I do is I get this edited. And if you signed up on the Open the Door link, which is if you go to my website, click join the tribe, that well, don't click it, but you'll see a drop down menu and it will say Open the Door. If you sign up to the Open the Door sign up link, then you will get the trimmed down version of this video, all the bells and whistles and all the sort of fluff cut out, which will take me a few days to edit, so bear with me. But that's why it's better if you sign up and do it that
Yeah,
way.
of course. There's a good comment here from Ross. What's the best luffs you think with Jump Up? So basically, with Jump Up, if it's like a hazard, DJ hazard thing or something like, you know, Serum or something like that, I would be aiming at around -4 lufs short term. Like if you can get your tune to -4 lufs, then well done. That's great. If it's breaking up and it's, you know, it sounds smashed, you need to go back to the mix, start applying limiting to the groups, clipping to the drums, just to create more headroom. You need to buy more headroom in order to get it louder.
And I've just dropped the Open the Door link in there. And also, if you're interested, whilst we're talking, in anything that I'm doing or Dapz is doing, maybe you want to get your link for where people can contact you and drop that in as well for their mastering needs, and they can reach out to you for that if you're interested in some help with mastering, in the sense of please master my tune. You know, I think it's important to know that you got to be able to send good mixes in, because he's not going to have time to give you feedback. And much as we'd love to give you feedback on every tune we do, until we open a subscription service and do something like that, that's not going to be possible now.
Also, sorry, Rap, I don't think I'm able to make a comment in the comment box, but I can send it to you as this private link, and you can just copy paste it in. 'Cause I think you're the
Perfect, that
host.
works.
So that's the website. If you want to go to there, you can send me an email. You can send a tune through there as well.
There you go. Just drop that in there. So you've got that now. You can reach out to Dapz. And
Okay,
anything
cool.
you're interested in, our new tunes or whatever we've got going on, obviously you can
I'll,
go to my
yeah,
website, djrap.com,
exactly.
and you can check out Dapz there. So it's all good.
Also, there's a good question here.
Go on.
Have you had
That's what we're here for.
clients? Yeah, so have you had clients that have said they're not happy with their master? Well,
Yeah, me every single month.
rap is the worst. Rap is like, what is this? Come on, man.
Nah.
Basically, like everything, you have your ups and downs. That's the way you learn. You know, you've got to learn by your mistakes. So, you know, I've been mastering for close to 15 years now. So I am going to get the clients that say they're not happy, but I would like to know why they weren't happy. So if I've destroyed their tune, like, oh, you've absolutely smashed it, like, as in limited it too hard, not smashed it like, well done, you did a good job, I would say, oh, okay, I'm sorry. Like, you know, that's when I started thinking, oh, give me reference, give me a self master so I know whereabouts they've took the tune. But yeah, I mean, I'm not going to lie. I've had people say, I'm not happy with what you've done. And they've gone on to someone else and they'd never let me sort of, you know,
Yeah,
justify.
but that's not actually something that happens a lot, which is good.
No,
But
no, 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 not
I
at all,
think
no.
I think what we're talking about is demoitis, and we should talk about this because it's a real thing. I sort of self master my tracks so that there's a reference mix. So when I
Yeah,
send the mix out, there's a reference mix of the track that I really love. Let's say I'll put a Blade Runner track in or Serum or something like that, whatever. And I'll be
okay.
like, it's this kind of tune, right? I'm making this kind of track. Now here's my self master because this is how I hear the tune being made, and I like what I've done. But just could you please make it sound like that, but better to your best of ability? So I'll
Got
send
it.
him whatever I can that will help him understand
Yeah,
what it is I'm going for, because every tune's different. Sometimes I'll make a tune that's more on the jungle side of things and it needs a different flavor, like it's more sub infused. And sometimes I'll be doing more of a jump up vibe, which is more about the mid range basses and stuff like
yeah,
that. And sometimes I'll just do a tune that's more, whatever. So
yeah, of
it's
course.
important to send those
There's another question here.
references.
What other genres? Well, basically, you know, like I say, I'll be straight up. I deal with a lot of drum and bass clients and jungle type clients. I also do a lot of like garage stuff as well, and also some of the stuff in the pop world. So yeah, for me, it's drum and bass is my bread and butter, but I do get a lot of drill and trap, and I get a lot of vocal work from some of the artists in drum and bass and drill trap. But it's mainly digital dance music. So if someone was to send me a track that they've recorded in a band, I'd probably, not that I can't do it, but I wouldn't do it. I would say, look, I'll give it to my mate. He's really good at doing that stuff. Give it to him. Do you see what I'm saying? Like my strengths are in digital dance music per se.
So what methods would you suggest to use when the subs are drowning out the kicks?
That's a real good question. So it depends. The answer is it depends. So it depends on, is the volume of the sub too loud? Is the kick got too much sub in? So you can either look at it as, let's high pass the kick to a point where it's cut out all the rumble and all the, you know, sub sound. If that doesn't work, you could put odd harmonics on a kick to excite the odd harmonics, and then you put even harmonics on the sub. So that way you're creating harmonics in between each other. That's a great way of separating the kick and the sub, you know, by using saturation and stuff.
No, so you want to make sure in your mix that you're rolling off any bottom end you don't need. And it's a good idea to learn where the sub lies and not have your kick fighting it, or to use side chaining, all these little things
Yeah,
that will give it,
side chain is, sorry, yeah, side chain is a great one. There's, you know, there's things like track spacer. Track spacer is great because it just carves out the frequency of the kick in the element you're trying to create space with.
I might have to get that because I'm tired of side chaining the way I'm doing it. So I
Yeah,
might
well,
have to.
track space is great because if you've got like a bass line and you've got another bass, and you shouldn't really layer basses on top, but if you use a track spacer, it will just carve out the space that you want to create. So it can't
That's
close
pretty
just come
cool.
in.
I might try that actually. Okay. I've got a question here that says, for vinyl releases, what EQ cuts do you recommend?
In drum and bass, what I was taught by one of the best cutting engineers in the game is up to about 30 hertz. It might seem a lot, but do it on a shelf. Don't use a high cut, use a shelf, because you're keeping the phase exactly the same. So if you use a shelf, come down like minus 10 dB, minus 20 dB on a shelf at 30 hertz, and it will just remove all that shit. So rubbish.
I've got a question here. What's your opinion on Yamaha NS10s? I've been considering them recently. I don't think they make them anymore. I actually have some. If you can see, they're up there
Yeah,
on the corner. And back in the day, the NS10s were the perfect radio. That they were what you would listen to your track if you made a pop track to see if that was the radio test was always done on NS10s, and then they stopped making them, didn't they?
yeah.
And they're quite rare now. I don't know if they've remake them. I mean, it's been 20 years,
Well,
but
it's not that they've remade them, but they've just basically updated them with the things like the Yamaha 7s and the Yamaha 5s. But to answer your question, I think they sound like crap, but they're a great reference tool. So, for example, I use Sound ID, and Sound ID has NS10 emulations, so I can make my speakers sound like NS10s by using
wow.
Sound ID. So it's just
Gotcha.
again a little thing. But there was another question there.
I've got one here. Oh, so I was going to say I'm going through them. I'm trying to go back and
Yeah,
go.
some good questions coming up.
There's one here that says 32-bit floating doesn't use dithering, right? Not sure I know what that means.
You need to watch the video of what Dan Wobble does on dithering, because I might be wrong here, but with 32-bit float, there is no reason to dither. I don't think you actually get the option to dither at 32-bit float. How do you look after your ears, Dapz? You need really expensive speakers and not play them very loud. No, you can play them loud, obviously, but like everything, don't sit there with it like absolutely blazing. I have it on a respectable level where I can hear what's going on, but having good speakers also helps. So the speakers I use are a full range monitoring system. They are Dutch and Dutch 8C, and they have like anti-phase grills on the side. So at the back of the speaker they have two 8-inch subs on the back, and on the front you have the mid-range and the tops. But these grills on the side flip the phase, so you don't get the room doesn't get involved with the speaker. It's very forwards driving.
Sorry, so just to clarify, because I actually need to buy some new speakers because I'm getting a different studio room. What speakers do you recommend?
What for yourself? What
For
size
myself,
room?
like
What size room?
so, and here's what I was going to ask: how important is it to tune the room? And when you so let's say you want to buy speakers, right? And you're like, right, I've got a room, and it's, I don't know, 30 foot by 30 foot or something. I don't know how big this is. It's fairly big actually. But let's pretend it's all soundproofed and done properly. Is there a specific group of speakers that you're like, that brand is particularly good?
To answer the question, and this is honest, right? Get the most expensive pair you can afford. That's my answer. Honestly, like, you can spend 300 quid on some like KRKs or Yams or Personas, whatever, right? And they will give you half the story. But if you then spend, say, $3,000 on a pair of speakers, the clarity becomes more, the translation in the low end's better. You spend 10 grand on a pair of speakers, it's like, wow. You see what I'm saying? I mean,
you know what? I don't need to go wow. That's ridiculous. I'm not going to spend.
If you want,
But I hear you. But for everybody else and the rest of us mere mortals,
okay.
what would be a good? What's that speaker that Kenny Ken was telling me about? I think it begins with not KRKs, but I think that the big. I can't remember the name.
I would recommend if
like £1,000 budget. Let's look at that.
On £1,000, have a look at the Dyn Audios, the LYD 48s. I think they're a little bit more than £1,000, but they are amazing. They're a three-way speaker. I've used them. They're great. You might be able to get a second-hand pair of some Neumanns, which are great for about £1,000. But if you want a speaker that sounds like a £3,000 speaker for a couple of £100, get the Cali Audios. Cali Audios.
Right, I'm going to need you to send me that in an email because
they are great. Like Moisin's got them. He loves them. They're great. And I know other people that have got them as well. I think they do them in an 8-inch and a 6-inch. So they're called Cali LP8s, Cali LP6s. Again, don't just get the big ones because you want loads of bass. If you're in a small room, it ain't going to make sense. That bass is just going to exaggerate and your room's going to come into play.
So how important is it to tune your room? I mean, how do you know you're getting the true sound from the speaker? That's what because I don't use speakers. I just use these because they're so damn good. Actually, there's a question about these and a Focusrite that you use these and you recommended them to me, didn't you? So if you're wondering what speakers, headphones to get, these I think are the best.
Yeah, the focal clears are great. They're
Yeah.
absolutely
Did
great.
I say Focusrite? Sorry, I meant focal. I'm
Focal.
tired.
No. We know.
Yeah, these are absolutely the best, and they're so good that I don't use speakers anymore because one, I've got neighbors. Two, the clarity in them is incredible. Yes, they are a bit expensive. I think they're around £1,000, £1,200,
Yeah,
but they are the reason my
they're
music
great.
has got better. And
They are
also,
great.
people that have worked with me before use them, and so many people who are mastering and mixing use these. They're really good.
I use them for like restoration work, and also, if I need to have a second sort of like ear on something. So if I come back to something the next day, I'll probably put the headphones on, and then I can hear much more detail, closely, for pops and clicks and any distortion and stuff.
Thanks, Papa G. I appreciate that. Nice one.
Papa G, my
Papa G in the
DJ.
house. Do you use, it says here, do you use speakers on stands or mats,
Who,
Dapz?
me?
Yeah, it's to you the
So,
question.
yeah, okay. So my speakers are on custom-made stands that are for these speakers. So they're screwed to the stands,
Ooh.
and then they're on spikes, and then they're on spikes, because the whole point of it is to have as much separation from your speaker to the surface as possible. So if your speaker's on a desk, get it off the desk, because your desk then turns into a part of the speaker, because the vibration translates through the desk, and then that vibrates, and then it's an enhancement. So you need to get like ISO pucks. I think they're like called ISO acoustic pucks. Again, the price ranges on the size of the speaker because it depends on the weight, but they're good. I think Papa G's actually got them, to be fair. Beans is in the room. Foam, tennis balls. Cut a tennis ball in half. Put your speakers on top of them. They're great. All these little things. They all
Really?
work great. Yeah, like if you get a tennis ball, cut it in half. Obviously, use 3 or 4. And
I was going to say one tennis ball. I can just see my
yeah, a bit all
speaker.
over the place. But no, obviously, do it properly.
Right, that's a good idea. I remember I had custom speakers made when I was signed to Sony, and when I moved and they were shipped, they got nicked, and
Oh
they cost me 10 grand.
Oh my
This was
God.
when I yeah, and they were the most amazing speakers, made in Germany,
God.
custom, beautiful
Wow.
they were. Broke
Yeah.
my heart.
I
All
bet it
right,
did.
ask Dean. No. Okay, well, we're not gonna. What we can't do is listen to everybody's track and give you critique. But we are thinking about
Maybe, yeah.
forming a partnership, Daps and I, and maybe in the future doing a subscription service where we actually fix people's tracks, help them out, and then you can follow along on how to learn to make your tracks better. We're thinking about it.
Yeah, we're thinking about it. But also, I
Probably.
think maybe in the last episode, we could get a couple of tunes from, obviously, you viewers, and we'll either master them live or we just review them live.
I think
That'd
review
be
it might take.
interesting.
We could do something like that. I was thinking about that. That
Yeah.
could be cool, but it has to be someone who's signed up on the link, and that would be good. And the link was, if you go to my website djrap.com, you will see that link under the Join the Tribe tab, and it says Open the Door. We are
Yeah,
approaching
so
the very end, so and I just want
just
to
quickly
say
then, yeah.
just some quick ones. What's the name of the
Ross.
headphones you were talking about earlier? These ones, I presume.
Yeah, so focal clears, great. The DT 770s or the 790s are great. They're really good budget headphones. Like when I say budget, I'm just saying like they're a good price for what you get in clarity.
Yeah.
What are they called? The DT, I forget the name now, but a lot of people are rocking them. Does it matter if you put your speakers on the side from Ross? Only if your speakers are designed to go on the side, then do it. If not, I wouldn't do it because they're not built to go on the side. There's one guy that did ask, roughly how much do you pay for mastering? Which I think is a good question. It can be anything from £10 to £100 per tune, depending on who you go with.
Well, back in the day, it was a lot more.
Yeah.
Like,
It was, yeah.
now it's a lot cheaper. I mean, it used to cost me hundreds and hundreds to master one track back in the day, but this is pop stuff, and you'd go to, oh my God, things have got cheaper. Thank the
They
Lord.
have, but the thing is with me, like, I'm a very reasonably priced like business, because my studio is a self-built studio in my own premises. So although I'm out the house or out the, my home, I'm still in my grounds in this purposely built room. Now, I don't have any overs, so it means when a client comes to me, I'm not charging you for the rent of my studio, the electric, the travelling to work. I can knock all that on the head and say, you want mastering? Okay, I'll just step out my back door, go into the studio. So that's why I can keep the prices very reasonable.
And
for the
again, you can
quality.
contact Dapz directly. I'll drop that link in again. And you can speak to him about that. Please don't flood him with what do you think of my track, because he's a very busy lad. And that's why we're doing this here. And yeah, I think it'd be good to actually maybe master somebody's track. That could be really cool. So that's his link there. And
Nice one,
I'm not
Nathan. Appreciate that,
I'm
man.
I'm not big on putting tons of links in here because look, if you're interested in my music, you're interested in where I'm playing, or you're interested in my merch or what I've got going on, you just go to my website. But I'm not going to just push stuff on you. That's just boring. But if you are interested in what's happening, push stuff. If you are interested in what's happening, and you sign up to my newsletter, basically I do on the first of every month a newsletter. I don't spam anybody, and I just do a newsletter saying what is happening on what date, so you always know what's going on, whether there's a Cool FM show, whether there's a gig, whether there's a special NFT drop, or whether there's a record out. It's all put in that newsletter a month in advance. And if you are interested in joining the tribe, where I stream for my tribe, play all forms of music, see all that vinyl behind me, it gets put to good use every month, then
Honestly.
feel free to join, because it's free for the first month, and it's $2.99 after that, which is not even the price of a cup of coffee. But there are other levels as well. And just take a look on the website, join the tribe, and have a look and see what I offer. It's a lot. We're 4 years strong, and we've built an amazing community of a couple of thousand people now who are just the sweetest, loveliest people. And I think with that, Dapz, I'm going to say thank you so
Yeah,
much for your time.
it
You've
was a
been
pleasure.
endlessly patient with everybody
Pleasure.
and their questions. Listen, everyone, we thank you for joining us so much. We
Yep,
really
thank you
appreciate
so
it.
much. I really appreciate it.
And we will see you next week. We're going to
Next
do this.
week.
I think it's next week, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. Yeah,
I think it is.
definitely.
And
Yeah.
we will show you more of the same stuff. So if you've got your
Yeah.
questions, get them ready, and make sure to answer some. Much love and bass to you. And Dapz, thank you so much for being my guest this month.
It was a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on. Nice one.
We'll see you on the next one where we open the door. Love and bass us. Bye.